Human, you can't just wed me. My alien mother insists you take her to the human. Mark had never expected his life to turn upside down in a single day, let alone in the middle of a galaxy far beyond Earth. He had come aboard the alien diplomatic vessel out of duty, not curiosity. Humanity had recently established a fragile alliance with the Elorians, a powerful alien civilization known for their strict traditions and intricate politics. The humans aboard the ship were part of an envoy, carefully observing, learning, and trying not to offend. Yet despite every protocol, Mark found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, or perhaps, in the right place at the right time. The ship trembled suddenly as an unexpected attack rocked the vessel. Alien pirates or perhaps rebels had found a way past the ship's outer defense shields. The bridge erupted in chaos, alarms screaming in sharp, unfamiliar tones. Mark felt his stomach churn. He was trained, yes, but not for the intricacies of alien shipboard combat. He followed the closest Elorian officer, trying to act confident, though every instinct in his human body screamed panic. Through a twisting corridor, he found her, the princess, Allura, struggling to override a failing system that threatened to explode the ship's core. Her long hair shimmered with a faint bioluminescent glow, a sign of her noble status. Even in that moment of danger, her presence carried authority, grace, and urgency. Allura was alone, and any wrong move could be fatal not just to her, but to the hundreds aboard. Mark knew he had to act, though he had no real plan. He rushed to her side. "I can help," he said, hoping his voice sounded firm instead of shaking. She looked at him with wide, sharp eyes, assessing instantly whether he was a threat or a fool. Finally, she nodded. "Quickly," she commanded. "I don't have much time." Together, they worked in chaotic coordination, Mark following her precise instructions. He held tools she passed him, rerouted energy flows, and followed sequences that made no sense to him logically but somehow worked. Sweat ran down his face as he realized the ship's core would fail if they delayed a second longer. He had no idea if he was helping or just making things worse. Then, with a final adjustment and a loud groan from the ship's engines, the core stabilized. The lights dimmed, the alarms ceased, and a collective sigh of relief swept through the corridors. Mark slumped against a wall, breathing heavily, while Allura straightened herself, brushing her glowing hair back with calm composure. She did not even glance at the damage around her or the chaos of the crew rushing to restore order. Her focus had been precise, flawless, and terrifying in its efficiency. "You," she said finally, eyes locking on his. "You saved me." Her voice was soft, yet it carried a weight no human voice had ever carried before. Mark blinked. I just helped." "You do not understand," she said. "Not many can act with clear thought in such moments. Most humans panic. Most fail." She studied him intently, as if trying to see every part of him, inside and out. Mark felt strangely exposed, though he had done nothing more than follow orders. He cleared his throat. "I'm just glad it worked." Allura's lips curved slightly. "Work, perhaps. But you acted when others would have frozen. That is unusual for your kind." Mark wanted to laugh nervously, but the seriousness of the moment held him silent. The princess turned and began walking toward the observation deck, motioning for him to follow. "Come," she said. "There is something you must hear, and the galaxy will not believe it easily." He followed, unsure what could possibly be more shocking than nearly dying in a spaceship attack. As they reached the deck, the stars stretched endlessly, clusters of distant suns and nebulae painting the black canvas with colors no human telescope had ever captured. And then she said it, the words that would change everything. "I intend to bond with you." Mark froze. "Bond with me?" His mind raced, trying to process the meaning. Humans did not understand alien customs, certainly not those involving marriage, alliances, or rituals. But he could feel from her tone that this was serious, non-negotiable. "Yes," Allura said, her voice calm, unwavering. "You saved my life. My people honor such acts. My bond is my gratitude, and I have chosen you." Mark swallowed hard. I don't even know the rules. I don't know your people. This is a huge responsibility." She shook her head. "It is not responsibility alone. It is trust. You have shown courage when many would fail. That is rare. That is why I have chosen you." Then, unexpectedly, she paused. Her face softened, but her eyes carried an edge of worry. "There is one more thing you must know." Mark's stomach dropped. One thing after everything. "What is it?" Allura turned her head slightly, as though hesitant to speak. My mother, she must also be accepted. You cannot bond with me alone. The bond extends to my family, and she is not negotiable. The words hit him like a meteor. Your mother? Wait, what do you mean I have to? Yes, she said simply, almost gently. She is the matriarch, the guardian of our traditions. My people will not accept my bond without hers. If you refuse me entirely. Mark's mind spun. How could anyone expect him to accept an alien ruler as part of his personal life? How could he even begin to understand what that meant? He tried to speak, but words failed him. The deck seemed to shrink around him, the stars blinking with alien indifference. Allura's gaze softened, almost pitying. I did not ask for this, she admitted, but it is our way. You may choose, but choosing me means choosing her as well. Before Mark could respond, the ship shuddered again. It was not an attack this time, but the sheer presence of authority arriving. Through the observation deck's transparent walls, he saw another figure materialize, carried by a smaller escort craft. The alien mother's ship landed with a grace that made the humans' jaw drop. She emerged slowly, each movement deliberate, almost ceremonial, radiating a power that Mark could feel in his chest. She was taller than most humans, her skin a luminous silver, her eyes deep pools of color shifting like galaxies themselves. Allura stepped aside and the mother's gaze fell on Mark. He could not breathe for a moment. Her eyes pierced him, judging him in a way no human had ever dared. And then she spoke, not in words he could understand, but in a tone that communicated authority, command, and a warning all at once. A translator at his ear converted it simply. You wish my daughter's hand? You accept my presence and authority as part of that bond. Mark swallowed. This was no ordinary marriage proposal. This was a test, a trial he had not trained for, not mentally or physically. Yet somehow he found the courage to meet her gaze. Yes, he said. I will do my best. I will not harm either of you. The mother studied him a long moment. Then slowly, imperceptibly, she nodded. Then we shall see if your humanity matches your words. Her tone carried no warmth. Yet in it there was curiosity, a dangerous, heavy curiosity that marked him as different from any human she had ever encountered. Allura moved closer to him, her hand brushing against his arm briefly. It was a gesture of reassurance, but also a reminder of what was at stake. The galaxy watches us now, she said quietly. Do not fail. Mark looked out at the stars, feeling both the enormity of what he had agreed to and the weight of the responsibility placed upon him. Humanity had long been underestimated in the galaxy. Few believed humans could survive on their own, let alone navigate the complex politics, traditions, and dangers of other civilizations. Yet here he stood, a single human chosen to bond with a princess and face her formidable mother, carrying the unspoken hopes of his entire species. The realization struck him fully then. This was more than honor, more than courage. This was humanity's chance to prove itself, not through conquest or power, but through trust, morality, and the courage to stand when everything seemed impossible. If he failed, it would not just be his own life at risk. It would be a symbol of what humans could or could not do in the wider galaxy. The stars outside shimmered, reflecting in the alien mother's unyielding gaze. Mark's heart pounded, yet he felt a strange calm settling over him. He did not know what the future would hold. He did not know the tests, the trials, or the challenges ahead. But he knew one thing: he would face them. Not as a pawn, not as a diplomat, but as a human, and that alone carried a kind of power even the galaxy might learn to respect. Allura's hand remained lightly on his arm, the first real physical connection he had felt with the alien world. And behind her the mother's presence loomed, imposing, intimidating, and yet in a way strangely protective. Mark took a deep breath. Whatever this bond meant, whatever trials awaited him, he had made his choice. Humanity, through him, would stand in the light of distant stars, ready to meet expectations, exceed them, and perhaps redefine what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had always doubted them. The first step had been taken. The alliance was no longer political, no longer distant. It was personal and infinitely more dangerous. And Mark, a simple human who had only wanted to serve, now stood at the center of an unfolding story that would shake the galaxy, and prove that humans were never as weak, fragile, or insignificant as anyone believed. The alien mother, known as Lady Viola, had entered the diplomatic deck without hurry, but every movement she made commanded attention. The crew of the ship, and even the seasoned Elorian officers, instinctively gave her space. leaving only Mark and Princess Allura within her presence. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and as she moved closer, Mark felt a pressure he had never known, an authority so complete it made the air itself feel heavy. Lady Viola looked at him, her gaze sweeping from his unarmed stance to the faint sweat on his brow. Then she spoke, her voice low, almost a hum, though the translator converted it clearly into human words. "You claim to accept my daughter, yet the bond you speak of, do you understand what it truly demands?" Mark swallowed. I understand that it is serious. That I must respect her and her people." He struggled for words because it suddenly felt so small compared to the immensity of the alien mother's presence. "I will do what I can." The mother's lips curled slightly. "What you can, human, may be far less than what is required." "Do you know how many species have attempted this? How many have failed?" Mark shook his head. "No, I do not know." "That is precisely the problem," Lady Viola said, her eyes narrowing. "You do not understand us. You do not understand what it means to bond not only with a princess, but with her family, her authority, and the expectations of an empire that stretches beyond stars you have never seen. Humans believe themselves strong. They are not." Mark's heart raced, but he stood his ground. "Maybe not yet, but humans, we learn, we adapt, we survive, we do not give up easily." There was a pause. Lady Viola tilted her head as if examining him for some hidden flaw. "Curious. You speak as if you know our ways, yet you have barely stepped into our world. Your confidence is unusual. Most humans would bow or beg." "I don't bow unless it earns trust," Mark said simply. "And I do not beg, I face what comes." The alien mother's eyes flickered with something that Mark could not identify, approval perhaps, but it was mixed with doubt. She stepped closer. "The bond is not only personal, it is public. Every action you take reflects not just on yourself, but on the humans you represent. One mistake, one thoughtless choice, and it could cost not only your life, but many others. Do you understand?" "I understand," Mark replied, his voice steady despite the fear creeping through him. "I am willing to face it. I do not want to fail, not for her, not for anyone." Lady Viola considered him silently, her eyes scanning the room as if reading the air itself. Then she turned to Allura, who remained composed, watching the exchange closely. "And you," she said, addressing her daughter. "Do you trust this human enough to put yourself and our family in his hands?" Allura's glow shimmered faintly as she replied without hesitation. "I do. He saved my life. He acted without hesitation when others froze. That is enough for me." The mother's gaze returned to Mark. "Then you shall begin your test. You will not simply stand beside my daughter. You will demonstrate your ability to survive, to lead, and to act when others hesitate. A bond with her requires more than words. It requires deeds that speak louder than anything you have said." Mark nodded. He did not fully understand what she meant, but he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a way for humans to show their worth in this alien world, and maybe, just maybe, he could prove that humanity had something no other species could match: adaptability and determination. The first test came sooner than expected. Sensors on the diplomatic deck detected an unregistered vessel approaching the planet below. Lady Viola's eyes narrowed. "A rebel faction. They aim to disrupt negotiations. They do not care who dies, only that chaos follows." Mark felt his pulse quicken. "What should we do?" "You will follow my instructions. Observe, decide, and act. The ship's defense systems are complex, but you will learn. Humans think they rely on machines. You will learn that trust in your own judgment can be stronger than any technology." The rebel vessel fired first, sending bursts of energy toward the diplomatic ship. Crew members scrambled, activating shields, and a tense hum of power filled the corridors. Mark felt fear, but it was tempered by focus. Allura motioned him to assist with navigation, redirecting power to shields and emergency thrusters. He followed her instructions carefully, every action precise. Lady Viola observed from a console above, speaking occasionally to give insight or direction. Her voice was calm, but the weight behind it carried authority that made the crew move faster and more efficiently than ever before. She did not interfere unnecessarily, letting Mark make small decisions, correcting only when the consequences were immediate. Through the chaos, Mark realized something profound. Humans did not excel because they had the strongest shields or the fastest ships. They excelled because they could think, adapt, and make choices in moments when others would panic. Even now, under fire, he felt a clarity of purpose he had never known before. The rebel vessel attempted to breach the outer hull. Allura moved closer to Mark, pointing to a control panel. Divert the energy, not too much or we risk an overload, be careful. Mark's fingers danced over the controls, adjusting energy flow while keeping an eye on the approaching vessel. He felt the hum of the ship beneath him, almost as if it were alive, responding to his choices. The shields held, the rebel vessel was repelled temporarily, and the crew began stabilizing critical systems. Lady Viola's gaze remained on him, unblinking. You are quick to learn, human. That is good. Yet this is only the beginning. True tests will come when lives, not machinery, are at stake. Mark nodded, understanding her meaning. She was not merely testing technical skills. She was testing character, courage, and resilience, the qualities that defined humans in ways the galaxy had never respected. Hours passed. The rebel vessel retreated, but the tension lingered. Lady Viola stepped down from her console and moved toward Mark. You have survived this encounter, yes, but do not mistake it for mastery. Every decision has consequences. Every action is a reflection of your species. You must prove that humans can act with wisdom, not just bravery. Mark felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. I will do my best, he said, the words simple, yet carrying weight he could feel deep in his chest. The mother nodded slowly. Your best may still not be enough. Many species fail when tested by duty and responsibility. But humans are unpredictable. That may be your greatest strength or your greatest weakness. Time will tell. Allura stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his arm. Do not doubt yourself, Mark. You have already shown courage where others would falter. The galaxy may not expect it, but I do, and that is enough for now. Mark met her gaze, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. He felt a warmth that had little to do with alien biology and everything to do with connection. He realized in that moment that the bond he was entering was not simply political or ceremonial. It was personal. It carried trust, respect, and a responsibility that transcended species. Lady Viola watched silently, her expression unreadable. Then, in a rare gesture, she extended her hand. We will begin training immediately. Observation, decision-making, diplomacy, and leadership. You will face challenges that humans are not meant to encounter. You will learn to survive. You will learn to act when the galaxy expects you to fail. Only then will your bond be considered valid. Mark placed his hand in hers, feeling the cool strength of her grip. I will not fail, he said simply. I will learn, I will adapt, and I will protect both of you if needed. The mother's eyes flickered with something he could not name. Approval, perhaps, but tempered by caution. We shall see, human. Actions speak louder than words. Your journey begins now. You are not merely a guest in this galaxy. You are a representative of humanity, and your choices will echo far beyond this vessel. For the next several days, Mark was subjected to lessons unlike anything he had experienced. Lady Viola tested him in strategy simulations, ethical dilemmas, and high-pressure scenarios that forced him to make decisions with imperfect information. Each time he faltered at first, only to learn from mistakes, to adapt quickly, and to act decisively when the moment demanded it. He discovered that humans' adaptability was indeed a unique strength. While other species relied on rigid protocols and strict hierarchies, humans could improvise, create solutions, and adjust strategies in real time. Lady Viola watched closely, noting the subtle differences in his approach, the quick thinking, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Allura, meanwhile, remained his constant support. She guided him through cultural nuances, explained the unspoken rules of Elorian politics, and offered insights into her people's expectations. Mark realized that while Lady Viola demanded results, Allura offered trust and encouragement, a balance that allowed him to grow rapidly. One evening, as the ship drifted above a distant nebula, Mark found himself alone with the mother. The stars reflected in her shifting eyes, and for the first time she spoke without a test or challenge. You are not what I expected, human. Perhaps there is more to your species than I believed. Yet do not grow complacent. Your trials have only begun. There are those who would seek to exploit weakness. Remember, courage alone is not enough. Wisdom, judgment, and restraint must guide your actions. Mark nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. I will remember. I want to earn your trust, not just for me, but for all humans. The mother regarded him silently for a moment, then turned away. Time will reveal your worth. For now, rest. Tomorrow, the lessons continue. As he lay in his quarters that night, Mark reflected on how far he had come. Just days ago, he had been an ordinary human, unsure of his place in the galaxy. Now, he was entering a world of responsibility, expectation, and challenge beyond anything he had imagined. The bond he sought with Allura was no longer just personal. It was a symbol of humanity's potential, a chance to prove that humans could rise above doubt, fear, and expectation. And he knew, deep in his heart, that he would not falter. The galaxy had yet to see the full measure of human courage, adaptability, and determination. Mark understood now that his role was not simply to survive, but to lead, to inspire, and to prove that humanity could meet any challenge, even one that demanded acceptance of an alien mother's authority. The journey was only beginning, but already Mark felt the stirrings of something greater. A bond, a test, and a chance to show the galaxy that humans were not weak, not fragile, and not insignificant. The stars outside the ship continued to shine, indifferent to the struggles of a single human. But Mark knew that his choices, and the choices of his people, would soon make even the stars take notice. The days following the first tests had changed Mark in ways he could feel in his bones. He no longer approached life on the alien ship with caution alone. Every step, every decision, every movement was deliberate. He had learned quickly from mistakes, adapted to strange technologies, and faced simulations that pushed him to the limits of reasoning. Yet nothing had prepared him for what came next. Lady Viola's tests had grown more demanding. She was no longer interested in technical skill alone. She wanted to see how a human responded under pressure when the stakes involved real lives. The first real test began with a sudden alert across the ship. A nearby colony had gone dark. Communications were cut, and no signals were being received. The Allurians feared an ambush by a rival species known for raiding unprotected worlds. Mark was called to the command deck, Allura already standing beside the mother. Her glow shimmered faintly in the dim lighting, a sign of anticipation that Mark had learned to recognize. Lady Viola's voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "You must lead the initial assessment team. Lives are at risk. Decisions are yours. Fail and the consequences will be catastrophic." Mark took a deep breath, steadying himself. The opportunity to prove humanity was immense, but so was the danger. He followed the mother and the princess to the mapping console, where holographic images of the colony flickered into view. Fires, structural collapse, and unusual energy signatures marked the city as highly unstable. He could feel the tension in the room, but he reminded himself of everything he had learned. "First," Lady Viola said, "observe, do not act rashly, do not assume motives, make decisions based on information, not emotion." Mark nodded. He analyzed the holographic data carefully, cross-referencing structural integrity readings, energy signals, and environmental conditions. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The colony had not been attacked directly. Instead, an environmental collapse was underway, likely caused by neglected maintenance, overuse of energy resources, or a combination of both. Yet there were anomalies. Small bursts of energy suggested sabotage. Someone wanted the colony to fail. He looked up at Allura, who studied him intently. "What do you propose?" she asked. Mark hesitated only a moment. "We divide our team. Half of us stabilize the most critical energy nodes. The other half investigates the anomalies to determine if someone caused this intentionally. We act quickly but carefully. We save as many as we can without risking the entire colony." Lady Viola's gaze sharpened. "And you trust humans to make this decision without supervision?" Mark met her eyes. "I trust humans to adapt. We can succeed if we focus, communicate, and remain calm." The mother's expression softened ever so slightly. "Perhaps you are different from others of your kind. Observe and report. Begin." Mark activated the command sequence, delegating teams and coordinating resources across the holographic grid. Orders were given, but he did not micromanage. Instead, he provided guidance, allowed individuals to respond to the evolving situation, and made minor adjustments based on feedback. It was a delicate balance, one he had not known he could manage. Yet as he watched the teams respond efficiently, his confidence grew. Hours passed as the operation continued. Explosions and small collapses occurred, but the teams avoided major losses. At one point, a sudden structural failure trapped several colonists in a building near an energy node. Mark had to make a quick decision, divert resources to rescue them or continue stabilizing the larger system. He chose rescue. The energy node remained vulnerable, but he calculated that the others could temporarily compensate. The rescue was successful. Mark's team brought the colonists to safety, while Allura coordinated communications with the planet's authorities. Lady Viola observed quietly, saying nothing, her eyes flicking from Mark to the holographic images and back. Finally, as the sun set over the distant planet, the crisis ended. The colony had survived with minimal casualties. Anomalies were identified as a sabotage attempt by a rival species, and human ingenuity had played a central role in preserving life. Mark sank into a chair, exhausted but exhilarated. Allura approached him, her glow soft, almost comforting. "You did well, not just for humans, but for everyone." Before Mark could respond, Lady Viola spoke, her tone measured. "You have succeeded in saving the colony." "That was not guaranteed. Many who have tried would have failed. You acted with courage, wisdom, and judgment. Yet remember this, courage alone is not enough. The galaxy will continue to test you, and the next challenge will be unlike any you have faced." Mark nodded. "I understand. I will not falter." The next weeks were filled with lessons, but now the tests became political as well as practical. Lady Viola exposed him to high-level diplomatic scenarios, teaching him the subtleties of alien negotiation, alliances, and deception. Mark learned that in some systems, a single wrong word could start a war, while in others, silence could be equally dangerous. One afternoon, the mother brought Mark and Allura to a conference room aboard the ship, where representatives from other civilizations had gathered. Humans were largely unknown here, and many species doubted their ability to contribute meaningfully to galactic politics. Some openly expressed skepticism, others covertly questioned the presence of a human among powerful alien leaders. Mark stood tall, though his heart raced. Allura's hand brushed against his arm, reminding him of her trust. He stepped forward and spoke clearly, introducing himself, explaining humanity's perspective, and highlighting the advantages of cooperation over fear. His words were simple but direct, showing empathy and intelligence rather than arrogance. The room reacted with surprise. Some leaders leaned forward, intrigued by his honesty. Others frowned, unconvinced. A debate began, but Mark navigated it with care, listening carefully, acknowledging concerns, and offering solutions that benefited multiple parties. When the discussion grew tense, he diffused it not by dominance but by pointing out shared goals, showing that humans could unify rather than divide. Lady Viola observed silently, her eyes sharp as ever. After the conference ended, she approached him. "You have surprised many. They expected weakness, indecision, or arrogance, yet you displayed clarity and patience. This is what I hoped to see." Mark felt a small surge of pride but remained humble. "I only speak honestly. Humans can adapt. We can learn. That is what sets us apart." The mother's eyes flickered with what Mark now recognized as cautious respect. "Yes, that is exactly what I am beginning to see. Your species has a flexibility and resilience unlike most others. You do not simply follow orders. You assess, adapt, and act. That is dangerous to those who underestimate you." Allura smiled faintly. "And that is why I trust him. He sees challenges clearly, even when others are blinded by fear or arrogance." Mark nodded, though he knew the mother's judgment was far more important. Lady Viola's approval was hard-won, and her standards were exacting. He understood that every future challenge would be harder, and the galaxy would not give humans second chances easily. A sudden alert interrupted the moment. Another crisis had arisen. A diplomatic ship carrying critical resources for the Alliance had been intercepted by an unknown faction. The room tensed. Lady Viola's gaze turned toward Mark. "You will lead the negotiation. Lives and resources are at stake. Fail and the Alliance suffers." Mark felt the weight of responsibility press upon him. He had grown confident, but this was different. It was not simply strategy or diplomacy in isolation. It was a combination of all he had learned: observation, judgment, leadership, empathy, and courage. He moved quickly, coordinating with Allura and other trusted officers. He assessed the intercepted vessel's movements, communicated with its commander, and offered terms that were fair yet firm. The other faction tested him, attempting to push for advantage, but Mark remained steady. He listened, responded with reasoning, and anticipated their moves. Hours passed, and the standoff ended without bloodshed. The intercepted resources were returned, and the other faction withdrew, acknowledging the fairness and intelligence of the human leader. Lady Viola's gaze met his once more. You have acted with skill and restraint. Once again, you prove that humans are capable of more than most believe. Mark allowed himself a small sigh of relief. He was learning, adapting, surviving, and leading. He understood now that the mother's tests were not merely trials. They were opportunities to show the galaxy what humans could do when given a chance. As he prepared to rest that night, Mark reflected on the journey so far. The challenges had been relentless, but he had begun to see the pattern. Humans survived because they could think creatively, act decisively, and maintain their moral compass even under pressure. These qualities set them apart, and he realized that he carried more than his own life and reputation. He carried the hope that humanity could prove itself in a galaxy that often dismissed it. Allura entered quietly, sitting beside him. "You've done well today," she said softly. "Even Lady Viola seems impressed." Mark smiled faintly. "I hope it is enough. I feel like there is always another test waiting." Allura nodded. "There is, but you've shown that humans can rise to challenges. That is why I trust you even when the galaxy doubts." Mark took her hand, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond species. It was a bond of trust, respect, and shared purpose. He realized that the tests were not just about proving human capability. They were about building relationships that could change the fate of entire civilizations. And as he looked out at the stars, he felt a quiet determination settle over him. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. Through courage, intelligence, and adaptability, they could prove their worth. He was ready for the trials ahead, ready to show that humanity could stand alongside the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and perhaps even lead when others faltered. Mark knew that the mother's tests would continue, each more challenging than the last. Yet he was no longer afraid. He had learned, adapted, and survived. He had begun to show that humans were unpredictable in the most advantageous way. They could think, decide, and act when others would crumble. And with every challenge, he was proving something that the galaxy had long forgotten. Humans could be more than survivors. They could be leaders. The journey was far from over, but Mark's confidence was growing. He was ready to face whatever came next, alongside Allura and under the watchful eye of Lady Viola. Humanity's story was unfolding, and he knew that the next chapter would require every skill, every ounce of courage, and every human instinct he possessed. The galaxy watched, unaware that a single human was quietly changing its expectations forever. The calm of the ship was deceptive. Mark had grown accustomed to challenges and tests, yet nothing prepared him for the sudden emergency that erupted one quiet morning. Alarms blared across the corridors, lights flashing red in the dim interior. Allura's glow flared brightly as she ran past him, her usual composure replaced by urgency. "What is it?" Mark asked, sprinting after her. "The Outer Fleet," Allura said, her voice sharp. "They've been ambushed by a previously unknown faction. Reports indicate they are heavily armed and ruthless. Our defensive perimeter is failing." Mark's stomach tightened. This was no simulation, no training exercise. Lives were at stake, human and alien alike. Lady Viola appeared beside them, her presence as commanding as ever. "This is your moment, human," she said. "You will lead the fleet response. Decisions you make now will affect the lives of thousands, including your own people." Mark nodded, already running calculations through his mind. He had studied tactics and strategy under the mother's exacting guidance, but the reality of commanding lives in battle was a weight he had not fully felt until now. The fleet's holographic map displayed dozens of ships under attack, energy signatures flickering as shields failed under heavy assault. He took a deep breath. "We need to split our forces strategically. Some ships will cover the perimeter while others will engage directly to draw their fire. We cannot protect all points at once, so we prioritize civilian and command vessels." Allura looked at him, concern flickering across her face. "You're sure?" "I'm sure," Mark said firmly. "We adapt as the battle unfolds. We cannot hesitate." The mother observed silently, her gaze piercing. Mark could feel her evaluating every decision. He knew that failure here would not be forgiven lightly, yet he could not let hesitation dictate his actions. The fleet moved, guided by his commands. At first, chaos reigned. Explosions rocked the ship, and distant energy blasts lit the void as enemy vessels advanced. Human intuition combined with the Elorian technology proved crucial. Mark directed ships with precision, predicting enemy movements and reallocating resources before situations became critical. At one point, a civilian transport was caught in a crossfire. Mark noticed the energy shields flickering dangerously. Without thinking, he diverted several combat ships to cover it, even as it exposed his flank. Allura's hand brushed his shoulder briefly. "Be careful," she said. "I will not leave anyone behind," Mark replied. His words were simple, but his resolve carried the weight of every human life aboard the fleet. The enemy advanced aggressively, attempting to exploit the humans' apparent inexperience. Yet Mark's adaptability and quick thinking countered every move. He predicted ambush points, redirected reinforcements, and coordinated defensive formations. The Elorian commanders began to trust his judgment, even those who had doubted humans before. Amid the chaos, Mark noticed something alarming. One of the enemy vessels, larger and faster than the others, was heading directly toward Allura's transport. Panic surged in him. He had to act immediately. Using a combination of the fleet's support drones and evasive maneuvers, he created a diversion that drew the vessel off course without risking civilian lives. The move was risky, but it worked. The transport remained safe, and the enemy ship overshot its target. Lady Viola watched the engagement silently, her expression unreadable. Mark could feel her thoughts, assessing his ability to make split-second decisions to protect others without succumbing to fear. Hours passed in relentless combat. The enemy was persistent, attacking from multiple directions and testing the fleet's coordination. Mark, though exhausted, remained focused. He learned to anticipate patterns in their assault, predicting their next strike before it occurred. When one of his own ships faltered, he adjusted tactics immediately, reinforcing weak points and compensating for loss of firepower. Allura remained by his side, helping with communications and strategy, her trust in him evident in every glance. She had learned to rely on his instincts as much as his knowledge, and he had learned to value her guidance, blending human intuition with her alien insight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the enemy began to retreat. Their fleet scattered, overwhelmed not by sheer firepower but by coordinated strategy, adaptability, and unexpected ingenuity. Mark exhaled, the tension in his body easing slightly. He had survived his first major engagement, and lives had been saved. Lady Viola finally spoke, her voice carrying across the deck. "You have done what many would consider impossible. You have preserved the fleet, protected civilians, and demonstrated judgment under pressure. Humans are surprising. Perhaps there is more to your species than I once believed." Mark felt a small sense of pride but quickly pushed it aside. There was no time for celebration. The battle had revealed vulnerabilities, points of weakness in fleet coordination, areas where human adaptability had saved lives only because of quick thinking, not because of the fleet's design. Allura approached him, her expression soft but serious. "You handled yourself well. But the galaxy is not forgiving. This is only the beginning. Others will test us and you must be ready." Mark nodded. He knew she was right. Every victory was temporary and every challenge would grow more complex. He had to continue learning, continue adapting, or risk failure in the next test. The following days were filled with debriefings and tactical planning. Lady Viola assigned Mark to lead training simulations for combined human and Elorian forces. The simulations were designed to prepare for unpredictable attacks, testing not just strategy but teamwork, communication, and creativity. Mark applied everything he had learned, blending human flexibility with alien technology, showing the fleet that cooperation and ingenuity could overcome even the most formidable threats. He discovered that humans had strengths the galaxy often overlooked: improvisation, adaptability, and moral judgment. While other species relied on rigid rules and predictable responses, humans could innovate in real time, making split-second decisions that often turned the tide of conflict. This impressed Lady Viola more than he realized. One evening, after a long day of simulations, Mark found himself on the observation deck, gazing at the stars. Allura joined him quietly, her glow soft. "You've changed," she said, "not just in skill, but in presence. The crew listens to you now, and even my mother seems different around you." Mark smiled faintly. "I'm just doing what I can. Humans survive by thinking, adapting, and helping others. I've learned to trust myself, and I've learned to trust them." Allura placed a hand on his arm. "That is exactly why I trust you, and why the galaxy should too." Before Mark could respond, a sudden alarm interrupted the moment. Lady Virla's voice echoed across the deck. "Mark, we have a new situation. One of the outlying colonies has been taken hostage by an unknown faction. They demand concessions from the Elorian Council, and lives are at immediate risk. You will lead the rescue." Mark's heart tightened. He had faced simulations, political tests, and even fleet combat, but this was different. Civilians were directly threatened. Every decision could mean life or death, he steeled himself. "I understand. We act quickly but carefully. Lives come first." Allura nodded, her eyes glowing with trust. "I'll be with you. We face this together." Lady Virla's expression softened ever so slightly. "Very well. Show me that humanity can act with courage, wisdom, and heart. The galaxy is watching." Mark took a deep breath and activated the fleet's jump engines, leading the task force toward the hostage colony. Every moment was tense. Enemy positions were difficult to assess, and the faction holding the colony was clever and ruthless. Yet Mark's calm determination guided every move. He coordinated landing teams, calculated risk points, and anticipated enemy strategies before they could act. The rescue operation began with precision. Small teams infiltrated the colony under Mark's direction, avoiding traps, neutralizing threats, and protecting civilians. He moved from console to console, monitoring progress and adjusting tactics. The enemy attempted to counteract, but Mark's human ingenuity, combined with Allura's insight and the fleet's coordination, allowed them to stay ahead. Hours passed. Civilians were evacuated, hostiles were subdued or contained, and the colony was saved with minimal casualties. Mark exhaled deeply, the tension in his body easing slightly. He had faced one of the greatest tests yet, and humanity had prevailed. Lady Virla's voice cut through the calms. "You have demonstrated not just courage, but leadership, judgment, and heart. You have exceeded expectations. Humans may be young in the galaxy, but they are capable of greatness. You have proven that today." Mark allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, though he knew challenges would continue. He had learned, adapted, and succeeded, showing the galaxy that humanity's strength was not in power alone, but in intelligence, courage, and the ability to act when others falter. Allura joined him again on the observation deck, her hand brushing against his arm. "You've done more than survive, Mark. You've led, and that is what matters. The galaxy will take notice." Mark looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a quiet confidence. Humanity was no longer underestimated. Through courage, intelligence, and action, they could prove their worth even among the most advanced civilizations. Lady Virla remained near, watching silently, her approval more evident than ever. The mother had set the trials, and the human had not only survived but excelled. The galaxy's perception of humanity was beginning to change, and Mark knew that the most critical challenges were still ahead. Yet, for the first time, he felt ready. The quiet on the diplomatic ship was brief. Mark had thought the worst was behind them after the hostage colony rescue, but the galaxy had other plans. Messages arrived simultaneously from multiple systems. A coalition of rival civilizations was forming against the Elorians. They sought to exploit the presence of humans in the alliance, to challenge both Elorian authority and the fragile new trust between species. Lady Virla summoned Mark to the command deck immediately. Allura followed closely, her glow brighter than usual, reflecting the tension in the room. The holographic displays showed fleets gathering at the edge of the system, ships bristling with weapons and shields, their formation designed to intimidate. "This is the ultimate test," Lady Virla said, her voice calm yet weighty. "You have faced simulations, crises, and diplomacy. Now you will see if humans can stand against overwhelming odds." Mark nodded, taking a deep breath. His hands hovered over the controls, but he understood that the fleet's strength alone was not enough. Strategy, adaptability, and decisive leadership would matter more than raw firepower. "We cannot match their numbers directly," Mark said, his mind calculating. "We must use mobility, coordination, and misdirection, lure them into areas where their advantage is neutralized. Use the environment to our benefit. Most importantly, we protect the civilian and command vessels first. Then, we strike intelligently." Lady Virla's eyes studied him closely. You speak boldly, human. Do you understand the stakes? I do, Mark replied. If we fail, many lives are lost, but if we act carefully, we can turn their strength against them. Humans can adapt in ways no other species expects. That is our edge. Allura placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes glowing with trust. I will follow your lead, Mark. Together we can face this. The enemy fleet advanced, their energy weapons flaring across space. Mark coordinated the defensive fleet, using a combination of evasive maneuvers, feints, and strategic retreats to create openings. Smaller, faster ships harried the enemy, drawing fire and revealing weak points in their formation. Humans and Elorians worked together seamlessly, adapting quickly to the changing battle. Mark noticed one of the largest enemy cruisers moving toward a critical civilian transport. Without hesitation, he redirected reinforcements, using smaller ships to distract the enemy while heavier vessels approached from behind. The maneuver was risky, but it succeeded. The cruiser's shields faltered, and it was forced to retreat temporarily, buying precious time for the transport to escape. Lady Viola observed silently, her eyes narrowing as she assessed his every move. Mark realized that her presence was both a challenge and a test. She was not only measuring his success, but also judging the humanity he brought to leadership. Calm under pressure, intelligent in decision-making, and willing to risk for the protection of others. Hours passed in relentless engagement. The enemy fleet pressed hard, attempting to overwhelm the combined forces. Explosions flared, energy beams cut through space, and ships maneuvered in complex patterns, each action dictated by Mark's quick judgment. He adapted continuously, using environmental anomalies, asteroid fields, and gravitational pockets to divide and confuse the enemy. Allura remained at his side, providing critical input on fleet positions and enemy movements. Together, they acted as a unit, blending human adaptability with Elorian experience. Mark's voice was steady over comms, giving clear instructions while remaining responsive to changing conditions. Every choice had consequences, yet every choice was deliberate. During a critical moment, the enemy tried to encircle the command ships. Mark acted instantly, directing a coordinated counterattack. Using a combination of human improvisation and Elorian technology, the fleet created a trap, forcing several enemy vessels into a narrow corridor. The result was devastating for the attackers. Ships collided, shields failed, and the advantage shifted in favor of the defenders. Even as the battle raged, Mark kept his focus on minimizing casualties. He adjusted tactics to protect civilian transports, even when it meant exposing combat vessels to danger. His actions demonstrated not only strategic brilliance but also moral clarity, a quality that the galaxy had rarely seen in humans or perhaps in any species. Finally, after an exhausting engagement, the enemy fleet began to retreat. Their forces had been diminished, their morale broken, and their strategy foiled by the combined skill, intelligence, and adaptability of Mark and the fleet. Lady Viola's voice resonated across the ship. You have succeeded where many would have failed. Not only have you defended the fleet, but you have demonstrated that humans are capable of more than any species expected. You have acted with courage, wisdom, and the ability to lead under pressure. You have proven your worth. Mark allowed himself a brief moment of relief, though he knew the consequences of failure could have been catastrophic. He looked at Allura, who smiled, her glow soft and reassuring. We did it, she said quietly. No, Mark corrected gently. We did it together. Humanity, your people, and ours, all of us. That is why we succeeded. Lady Viola stepped forward, her presence commanding yet less intimidating than before. You have not only passed my tests, human, but you have exceeded expectations. Your species' unpredictability is its greatest strength. You act where others hesitate. You think where others follow rules blindly. That is why I can accept you, not just for my daughter, but as a symbol to the galaxy. Mark felt a weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by a quiet pride. He had faced simulations, diplomacy, battle, and direct crisis. He had survived, adapted, and led. Humanity, underestimated for so long, had finally been recognized as more than capable, perhaps even extraordinary. Allura moved closer, her hand resting on his arm. You've proven yourself, Mark, not just to my mother, but to everyone watching. And not through strength alone, but through intelligence, courage, and heart. Mark smiled, feeling the truth of her words. He realized that the journey had been more than survival or victory. It had been about demonstrating the qualities that made humans unique: adaptability, empathy, creativity, and the courage to act when others faltered. Lady Viola nodded once, decisively. The bond may proceed. Not because it is easy or because it is expected, but because it is earned. You have shown that humanity is capable of honor, wisdom, and leadership. You will marry my daughter. And in doing so, you accept responsibility for both her and me, not as a burden but as a shared trust. The galaxy will witness a union that reflects cooperation, courage, and mutual respect. Mark's heart swelled. The mother's words were not a command. They were a recognition, a validation of every trial he had endured. The bond with Allura, once uncertain and daunting, was now a partnership built on trust, courage, and shared purpose. Allura smiled at him, her glow steady and warm. "Are you ready, Mark?" she asked. "I am," he replied, his voice strong. "For you, for your mother, and for humanity." The ship's crew, human and Elorian alike, watched the declaration with quiet awe. Even those who had doubted humans now saw them in a new light. A human had not only survived the trials of an alien empire, but had excelled, proving that courage, intelligence, and moral clarity could match, or even surpass, the strengths of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. As the formal ceremonies were prepared, Mark reflected on the journey. He remembered the first moments aboard the diplomatic vessel, when saving a life had seemed like the only measure of his ability. He remembered the mother's piercing gaze, the countless tests, the battles, the crises, and the diplomacy that had stretched his mind and courage to their limits. And now, as the stars shone outside the ship, he realized that humanity's story was being rewritten, not through conquest, but through action, intelligence, and character. The galaxy had always underestimated humans, but that had changed. Through determination, adaptability, and the willingness to face impossible odds, humanity had earned recognition, respect, and a place among the stars. The bond ceremony was simple yet profound. Mark and Allura stood together, hand in hand, while Lady Viola observed. The symbolism was clear: unity, trust, and shared responsibility. The union was not just personal. It represented the strength of collaboration between species, the courage of humans to rise to challenges, and the potential for the galaxy to embrace a new era of cooperation. When the ceremony concluded, Mark looked at the mother. "Thank you," he said simply, "for trusting me, for testing me, and for giving humanity a chance to prove itself." Lady Viola's eyes softened slightly, the first trace of warmth he had seen. "You have earned this, human. Not because I expected it, but because you acted with intelligence, courage, and heart. Remember that. Humanity is now part of this galaxy's future. Do not squander it." Mark nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. The tests were over, but the responsibilities were just beginning. He had proven that humans were capable, but now it was up to him and his people to uphold that reputation, to continue showing the galaxy that humans were not fragile, weak, or insignificant. Allura's hand rested lightly on his arm. "We face the future together," she said softly. Mark smiled. "Together," he agreed, knowing that humanity's journey was far from complete, but confident that they had already begun to change the galaxy's expectations forever. And as the stars stretched endlessly outside the ship, Mark felt a quiet certainty. Humanity had survived, adapted, and triumphed, not through power alone, but through courage, intelligence, and heart. The galaxy had witnessed the truth. Humans were more than capable. Humans could lead. The bond was complete, the trials passed, and the galaxy had no choice but to recognize that humanity, at last, could stand as equals among the stars.